welcome to episode 53.
53?
That's a lot of episodes.
Yeah, there's going to be more. We just finished a series of 3 sessions, 50, 51, 52, all pertaining to one letter, 88, the God letter. And there was some really good information in that. And being that Hume likes to debate everything, of course, he came up with some objections. We're going to find out about that a little bit later in this session. But in the meantime, remember that a few sessions back, we had the infamous HX letter, where Hume had decided to take his case before the public and argue that these Asiatics were selfish, that they had information that they refused to divulge to him and the rest of the Western world, and he didn't think that was right. They tried to explain that they were not at liberty to divulge everything that they knew, but he didn't go along with that. So they've had some problems, and in the meantime, both Morya and the Mahatma Chohan have pretty much given up on Hume as a candidate for being trained and are focusing entirely on Sinnett. But KH, being KH, is much more patient than either of them, and he is much more involved personally in getting this information to the Western world. He has devoted years of his life to that very setup of getting part of their doctrine into the hands of Westerners so they could start working on a more spiritual path. So he hasn't given up entirely on Hume, but even he is getting extremely frustrated and tired with it. Let's go ahead with letter 89. In the meantime, Sinnett sent a letter to Morya and suggested that he use his brightest red ink to write a letter to Hume and try to straighten him out. So this is a letter from Morya to Sinnett responding to that letter.
Letter number 89. I will thank you, my dear Sinnett Sahib, for a personal favor. Since KH is too much of a perfect yogi arhat to stop the hand trying to catch the Tibetan yak by the neck to bend it under its yoke, then all that remains for me to do is to again appear on stage to stop a performance that threatens to become boring even to us, who are well trained in patience.
Now, he used, obviously, a Tibetan saying without explaining it, but it's quite graphic, trying to catch a yak by the neck and bend it under the yoke, meaning trying to force someone into doing what they should be doing.
I cannot avail myself of your kind advice to write to Mr. Hume in my brightest red, since it would be opening a new door for an endless correspondence. In honor, I prefer to decline.
Yeah.
But I write to you instead and send you a telegram of his and answer on the back of it for your perusal.
So Hume had obviously written numerous letters to both of the Mahatmas, and in addition, he sent a telegram to Morya, and now Morya is forwarding the telegram to Sinnett with some of his comments on the back. So he quite often refers to quotes that are on either the telegram or perhaps some of the letters that were sent.
We did make it clear that this letter is from Morya, not from KH. Okay.
This is from Morya.
Question, when letters are sent to KH or Morya, we don't know what the address is?
No. In most cases, they sent them either to HPB, who was in Bombay at this time, or they sent them to one of his chelas, because he did have some chelas in Simla.
KH's chelas.
Yes, or Morya, both of them had chelas in Simla. So one of those chelas could very well have transmitted it psychically to them.
But Sinnett and Hume would have written an address and taken it to the post office.
No,
No, it would be just a letter in an envelope, or maybe not.
Well, only if they were sending it to HPB and maybe to one of the chelas who lived in a different city from Simla.
That would be sent through the actual post.
Right. But it didn't go directly to the Mahatmas.
Right.
None of them did.
Right.
The Mahatmas, both of them really, are generally in Shigatse, which is north of Parejang, the monastery that we've mentioned several times. And it's quite remote. There is no real mail service there.
It's safe to assume that the letters that Sinnett and Hume would write physically, they would never just leave them on the table, for example, and they would be picked up. That wouldn't happen. They have to get them to go somewhere to a chela or HPB first.
There have been some in the past, but more and more of this phenomenal transfer has been cut down and cut out. So I don't think at this time that was very likely.
Mm-hmm. What is this talk of his? Reverence may not be in his nature, nor does anyone claim or care for it anyway. But I should have thought that his head, which is large enough to hold anything, would have a corner in it for some common sense. Wow.
These two Mahatmas are very good at giving shade.
Throwing shade on Hume. And that sense would have told him that either we are what we claim, or we are not. And that, if we are what we claim, however exaggerated the claims made on behalf of our powers may be, still, if our knowledge and foresight do not transcend his, then we are no better than shams and impostors, and the quicker he parts company with us, the better for him. But if we are in any degree what we claim to be, then he acts like a wild ass. Let him remember that we are not Indian rajas in need of political ayahs and nursemaids to lead us by a string, and that the society was founded and will continue with or without him.
An ayah is a domestic servant, a female domestic servant. And the British people who moved to India to work there were delighted to find that they didn't have to pay the high prices that they used to have to pay in England for domestic servants. Now they had domestic help that was far cheaper. And many of them actually brought those servants back to India. And many of the people who never left England would hire these ayahs who came from India to work as their maids and house help. That's the meaning of ayah. But the way Morya is using it is to say that they're not these decrepit old rajas who need someone to lead them around by a string because they're blind or feeble.
So far, his help, which he thrusts on us like the Spanish bandits who offer their sword to protect the traveler with one hand and clutch him by the throat with the other, has not, as far as I can see, been very beneficial to the society. Not to one of its founders at any rate, whom he nearly killed last year at Simla, and who he now harasses, sticking to her like grim death, turning her blood into water and eating her liver out. Oh my gosh.
And remember, she's in the process of going to meet them near Darjeeling. We've talked about that a couple of times. This hasn't occurred yet, but very soon after this, she will be going to Darjeeling, which is not too far from Simla. And then she's going to go farther north to the very border almost with Tibet, and they will meet her there. And again, this is a very wild and lawless area of India called Sikkim. And we'll talk about this story perhaps in our next session. It's quite interesting.
Therefore, I expect you to impress upon him that all we should give thanks for would be to see him take care of his eclectic and leave the parent society to take care of itself. His advice and help to the editor of the Theosophist has no doubt been very helpful to her, and she does feel grateful to him for it, after deducting the large amount she owes to you. But a line ought to be drawn somewhere between said editor and ourselves, for we are not quite the Tibetan triplets he takes us to be. Therefore, whether or not we are the ignorant savages and orientals of his making, we do claim the right to know our own business best, and respectfully decline his services as a captain to steer our theosophical ship on the ocean of worldly life, in quotes, as he metaphorizes in his shloka.
So Hume, as we mentioned in previous episodes, is trying to set the stage by breaking the society. First of all, he thinks that they made a horrible choice with HPB and Olcott as their spokespersons for the Western world, and that he obviously could do a far better job than either one of them. And so he has been offering himself for the last almost 2 years as a replacement for them, and they haven't picked up on that. And he doesn't understand why. He's pulled out all the stops to show how smart, intelligent, how completely superior he is to these two individuals, one a Russian and the other a bumbling American, who cannot possibly appeal to the erudite English society. So he's trying to break the system so that he can now say, look, your system is broken. Here I'm offering myself to be the captain of the SS Theosophy, and I can steer it clear of these shoals that they're headed towards. And the Mahatmas are trying to carefully decline without getting him very angry.
We have allowed him, under the pretext of saving the situation with the British Theosophists, to vent his animosity against us in the organ of our own society, and to paint our portrait with a brush dipped in haughty bile. Jeez. What more does he want? As I ordered the old woman to telegraph him back, he is not the only skillful navigator in the world. He seeks to avoid western breakers, and we seek to steer our canoe clear of eastern sandbanks. Canoe. He calls it a canoe.
Right.
That's funny.
No, they are funny. So Hume thinks he's steering this great big
Titanic-sized
ship, and they're like, we just want to keep our canoe off of the eastern sandbanks.
Does he mean, in addition to this, to dictate from the Chohan down to Jwalkul and Deb what we shall and shall not do? Ram Ram and the holy Nagas. He's on one. He's chanting.
Yeah,
Ram Ram.
he's used similar mantras before.
Morya is usually the stoic one.
He is, but he's very funny too.
What are Nagas again? We've talked about that before, but
Serpent, but yeah.
Yes, snake.
But they're in Asian philosophy the representative of wisdom.
Right. There's some depictions of like a serpent holding the world up in a sense. Yeah. Is it after centuries of independent existence that we have to fall under a foreign influence to become the puppets of a Simla nawab?
Nawab is the correct pronunciation in Hindi and in Sanskrit. It refers to a foreign viceroy, and the term came into use when the Mughal Empire came about, when the forces of Genghis Khan invaded that whole area of the world and established their rulership over it. Their realm of Genghis Khan stretched all the way from the Baltic Sea to the Pacific Ocean and went down through all of the Middle East.
The Pacific Ocean, like Japan area, eastern China.
Clear over to the eastern coast of Asia. And it went even into the northern part of India. It covered an enormous section of that part of the world. So a nawab is a viceroy that was imposed on them. It never did have a good connotation. But when the English came and imposed their rule, they were also called nawabs. Well, in English, of course, they changed the pronunciation and it became nawab and even nabob. So you may have heard the term nabob as a pejorative, and it is a pejorative because they don't have any respect at all for these nawabs or nabobs.
Nabobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we schoolboys in his fantasy that should submit to the rod of a pelling schoolmaster?
Pelling being a foreigner.
So, just so I'm clear on this, the concept here is Hume is mad that these guys won't give him phenomena. They won't let him have a larger role. And so this is still kind of the conflict that is in front of us. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Notwithstanding his sulking, please tell him that you heard from me and that I have asked you to convey my ultimatum. If he doesn't want to break with the whole operation altogether, I will not allow him to interfere with his wisdom, in quotes, between our ignorance and the parent society, nor shall he inflict his bad humor on one who is not responsible for anything we may do or say. A woman so sick that, as in 1877, I am again forced to carry her away for fear she will fall to pieces, just when she is needed so much where she is now, at headquarters.
So they are forced, partly because of Hume, to bring her to them to rescue her health, which is in serious condition. And Hume has a lot to do with that. Now, I tried to figure out when it was in 1877 that they did the same thing. So I did a little research. It wasn't in 1877, it was in 1878. And they were in America at the time. I know she didn't travel physically, but here's what I found out. I think it was in April of that year. She was at her desk writing, and the next thing she knew, she was in bed. And all these people were around her, Olcott and several of her friends. And she said that they looked like their faces had been boiled. They were worried and concerned. And she said, "What's up? What has happened here?" And they looked at her like she was crazy. And she found out that she had been in a coma for 4 days.
Oh, gosh.
And apparently that was the time when they brought her psychically for 4 days to be worked on. And she didn't have any memory of that at all. And yet, after that, her health improved. She was in much better stamina, much better physical condition for quite a while. So that, I'm convinced, was the episode he was talking about.
Wow. And Morya is referring to the fact that they may do it again to help her health.
We've helped her once in 1878. He was off by a year, and now we have to do it again.
And the reason that Hume is a big cause of her health is because of the stress?
Yes. Yes, she's got enough stress as it is, dealing with all of the attacks against her by the Christians, the scientists, the spiritualists, and the English people.
This state of hers was brought on by him, owing to constant anxiety for the society and partially, if not wholly, by his behavior at Simla. The whole situation and future of the eclectic hangs on Kutumi, if you won't help him. If, notwithstanding my advice and the Chohan's displeasure, he persists in making a fool of himself by sacrificing himself, the evil genius of the society, in one direction, well, that's his own business, but I will have nothing to do with it. Your true friend I will ever remain, even if you turn against me one of these days.
That's kind of prophetic. Keep that in mind.
Oh gosh, I hope Sinnett doesn't turn against him. Fern was tested and found a thorough dugpa in his moral nature. Wow. Dugpa.
On the left-hand path.
Because he was lying, really. He wasn't telling the truth and manipulating, and yeah. We shall see, we shall see. But very little hope remains, notwithstanding his splendid capacities. That's regarding Fern.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Had I hinted that he deceived his own father and mother, he would have thrown in his grandparents in the bargain. Wow. Vile, vile nature, yet irresponsible. O ye Westerners, who boast of your morality. Yeah. Do we? Do Westerners boast of morality? Maybe Hume
Well,
does.
they all think because they're Christians that they are these very pious, moral people.
Well, I know Hume does. Mm-hmm. May the bright Chohans keep you and all yours from the approaching harm, is the sincere wish of your friend, Morya. Wow. Wow. He's alluding to something big.
Yeah, they know that there is trouble brewing. But here's a good time to give an update on Fern. They had been working with him for the last few months trying to save him because of his amazing capacity. He was already psychic to a great enough extent that they could communicate directly with him. And they were really hoping that he would overcome some of the defects he had so that they could use him as a transmitter and receiver of information for other people, that he could be trained the way their regular chelas were trained. But because he was young and impetuous and full of himself, had a huge ego, almost as big as Hume's, not quite, he was more interested in the power that would come along with that than anything else. So he failed dismally. The fact is, even though he was working at one point as a secretary to Hume, I don't think he was at the time he failed. What happened was Olcott received information from Morya that he was to rescind the membership of Fern in the Theosophical Society. Because, and he didn't give the reason at the time, Olcott wrote in his diary, I don't know what's up, but I've been ordered to kick him out of the society. He found out later that he was guilty of embezzling money from his employer. And so he actually, Fern did, turned in his membership certificate and the one letter that he had received from the Mahatmas, and that was the end of his membership, and we have absolutely no more information about Fern after that. No one seems to know what happened to him.
They made him disappear.
No, I don't think so.
And I'm joking, I know.
No, but several of these chelas who had amazing opportunities, Subarao, Mohini.
Deb.
Not Deb. We're going to get into that soon here. There's a mystery involved with Deb.
But Fern, for sure.
Babaji, yes, and Fern, they all failed dismally. And after they failed, they went into obscurity. They accomplished nothing of any importance. And it's quite sad, but it's a lesson for all of us.
We might have mentioned before, the only chela that we were aware of that did succeed was Damodar.
Yes, he was laser focused. And he was young. He was in his mid-20s when he first met HPB, and from that moment on, he was laser-focused on becoming an accepted chela and moving forward.
I wonder why he didn't give more teachings, or he wasn't more prominent than after he was on his track. Maybe that wasn't his constitution. He was to be behind the scenes.
Right. He did do some teaching in private. He wrote a number of letters to W.Q. Judge, for example, and they're included in the book Damodar.
Really? I didn't know that.
And he's quite good at his explanations, but at the same time, he didn't know nearly as much as Subarao did about the doctrine. So he needed more training, and perhaps at this point, he would be an excellent teacher.
Subarao was a little bit older, in his 30s, though, but not much older.
Not much older. He was only a few years older, but Subarao had studied these things in a previous lifetime. And after he met HPB, all of a sudden, like in a flash, all of this previous information came back to him. So he had spent a lot of time previously, and perhaps Damodar hadn't. All right, that's the end of the letter from Morya, but it's a nice interlude. And he came out of retirement specifically to decline the offer by Sinnett to write to Hume, but he felt obligated to give Sinnett the reasons why he was declining.
retirement only in the sense of communication, but he was
Yes.
still doing.
Yeah, he's still working very much behind the scenes. Several of our regular viewers have mentioned that as time goes on with our sessions, there's a difference. In the beginning, all of the information was seemingly kind of haphazard, a bit of information here, something over here. And now, all of that is starting to gel. It's all starting to come together into a coherent philosophical idea, and with very practical information for everyday life. This is exactly what Theosophy is. But that also is a great indicator of why Theosophy is so difficult to learn or to teach to other people. Keep in mind that nearly all of us Westerners, if we have any philosophy at all, it is either directly or indirectly from Christianity. And whether or not you were raised going to church every single week or not, you still have this. And the Mahatmas have pointed this out to the two Englishmen. They were considered better candidates for learning this than most other English people or Westerners because they weren't raised in ultra-religious families. And yet, through osmosis, they still picked up a lot of this Christian thinking and doctrine even without realizing it. So Hume, especially, is kind of throwing that back at them.
Well, it's kind of just the general paradigm of the Western world is Christian views, basically.
Yes, exactly. It is the underlying philosophy of our social network. So trying to change that and convince people that that is not a useful viewpoint, and instead trying to explain to them, teach them what this ancient wisdom doctrine is, and it's all-inclusive, as we've said, is a tremendous, difficult project. But we are doing it. Anyone who is coming into this by watching this video first, you may very well want to go back to the very first session and start watching them from the beginning, because these are all additive. If you jump into it right now and understand everything, then you've studied this before. But if not, you need to go back and pick up all of the other pieces that you're missing. So many people have noticed that now they're really beginning to understand this to the point, kind of funnily,
They say that in England.
that now they feel more obligated to actually put them into practice because it makes more sense, it's completely logical, and it's true. They recognize, the people that we've received feedback from, that it is everything we've said, the truth. And so there's no excuse anymore not to put it into practice. And that means you have to accept responsibility for your own life.
Adding on to what Terry is saying, and it is hard to rewire our whole way of seeing the world. It is hard. And if, like Terry said, if you're coming into this video for the first exposure to this, it takes a long time for most people to see a different viewpoint of their lives and the world. And if this is at all interesting, yes, please go back and watch as many as you can, preferably all of them. I know that there are a lot. This is session 53, and we have many more. But if you're interested in it, it takes that long to really change the way that you live, right? It can't be immediate. It's not going to resonate. If it does resonate, that's cool, but will you make changes? Probably not. How long does it take to master an instrument? How many thousands of hours? 10,000, I think, is the accepted number of hours to become expert level at anything, sports, music. So same thing with mastering your life or changing your viewpoint to something more healthy, perhaps. Or to realize that we do need to take responsibility, realizing that we're not going to get what we want by praying to an external entity. Pray to your damn self and give yourself the power and take the steps. But maybe you have to watch 50 videos to do that, or to realize that that's how it does work. Then you can decide if it's truth. You decide if it's truth. Don't listen to us. You decide.
Yeah, don't take it based on what has worked for us, but it has worked for us.
Of course it has. That's why we're doing this.
We recognize that very few people, percentage-wise, will be able to even recognize any part of this. We understand that. There are relatively few people in the world that are ready for this tremendous change. And yet, it is coming. More and more people are recognizing the value in it. The people who will get the most of it are the ones who are willing to take charge of their life. Perhaps in the past, they have said, no, I don't trust my own self. I need somebody to tell me what is valid, what is not valid, what I can do, what I can't do. I need a list of rules. I need someone to watch over me. Well, this is not it. So for those people who still don't trust themselves, you will probably not find a lot of value in this. But for those who are willing to take responsibility for their own life and not hand it over to someone else who may or may not be smarter than you, but who has more ambition than you do, and may be able to extort money from you, take responsibility for yourself. Apply these things as much as you can, and then watch. See if it works. If it doesn't work, you haven't lost anything except some time. But for many people, they will find an enormous amount of value in what we are teaching. So let's continue. We're on letter number 90, received at Simla in October. Now, we've received a number of letters going back and forth between the Mahatmas and these Englishmen in August and September, and now we're finally in October.
All right, letter number 90.
Now, let me give you a little background. This was actually a letter received by Hume from KH, because Morya wasn't going to write him a letter. So KH wrote to Hume. Hume shared it with Sinnett because they're both still living at Simla for the time being, but very soon Sinnett will be returning to Allahabad for the cold season. And HPB is actually going to stay with them on her way back from Darjeeling. So Hume shared this letter with AP Sinnett, and he took some extracts from it. He was very careful in his writing because he was a newspaper editor. So we can assume that this is quite accurate, but it's not the entire letter. And it's even less because I cut it down by at least 40%.
So again, Hume only shared portions of it with...
No, I think he shared the entire letter, and there may have been some personal things that he didn't feel were appropriate to share.
This is Sinnett's redaction.
Right.
Okay.
This is his transcription of the letter.
Okay. It says, so the first line, extract from letter by Kuthumi to Hume, received for my perusal toward the end of the season 1882. APS. Alfred P. Sinnett. Did it ever occur to you that universal mind, like the finite human mind, might have two attributes or a dual power? One the voluntary and conscious, and the other the involuntary and unconscious, the mechanical power.
All right, this is going to be a very important concept. Remember, as above, so below. So we're talking about comparing the universal mind, which is the entire cosmos, the thinking, intellectual part of the cosmos, with the human mind. And KH is going to make some very interesting analogies here.
I also would like to say that they might not have used the term before, universal mind. Have they used that?
Oh, yes, they've used it several times. And remember, they even said that the universal mind is the sum total of the Dhyan Chohans. They're even higher. Of all the experience and knowledge and intellect of the Dhyan Chohans, the highest rulers of the universe.
And it would stand to reason, now I'm going to connect some dots, which may be your dots as well that are being connected. This universal mind could be where the concept of a God comes from, but it's not the same as what's in most Bibles. But this could be God in some people's views of the universe.
Right. The entire God letter was a comparison between the Christian version and the view of the Adepts about divinity, and there are some stark differences.
To reconcile the difficulty of many theistic and anti-theistic propositions, both of these powers are a philosophical necessity, meaning the conscious aspect and the involuntary and unconscious aspect.
Right.
They are both philosophical necessities. The possibility of the first, the voluntary and conscious attribute with regard to the infinite mind, will remain forever a mere hypothesis, whereas in the finite mind, it is a scientific and demonstrated fact, because that's our brain, that's our own thinking capacity. The highest planetary spirit is as ignorant of the first as we are.
Yes. Now, this is seemingly the contrary of what we would expect.
Wow.
He's saying that the planetary spirits are ignorant of this conscious mind.
Wow.
Wow. Yes, let's continue, but that is absolutely the contrary of what we would expect.
But he's saying as ignorant of the first as we are. We're not ignorant of the conscious mind, but maybe he'll explain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see.
And the hypothesis will remain one even in nirvana, as it is a mere inferential possibility, whether there or here. Okay, well, we need to read that again.
Yeah, go ahead.
The highest planetary spirit is as ignorant of the first as we are, and the hypothesis will remain one, even in nirvana, as it is a mere inferential possibility, whether there or here.
Now, remember, we learned in a previous session that during the pralaya, the resting phase, not even the Dhyan Chohans are active. They don't even exist. Keep that in mind. All thinking, all motion, all activity, not all motion, but all activity ceases. There's just this kind of a hum and a buzz of some kind of atoms in space. They're not even physical, whatever they are. Potential atoms, you might say. But there is something that does continue to exist during the pralaya, but it isn't any consciousness. It isn't even the Dhyan Chohans.
Take the human mind in connection with the body. Man has two distinct physical brains, the cerebrum with its two hemispheres, the source of the voluntary nerves, and the cerebellum behind and below, the source of the involuntary nerves, which are the agents of the unconscious or mechanical powers of the mind.
All right. We've all learned this in grade school science classes. The brain has two parts to it. The cerebrum, which is the vast majority of the brain in the human, and then at the base, at the back, there's a kind of round-shaped separate brain, a primitive brain. And that's where our autonomic nervous system comes from. That's what controls breathing and digestion and the heart processes of pumping blood. All of the things that most of us have almost no control of. Some, because obviously we can change our breathing, but most of the rest we have almost no control over.
This is obviously a huge shift in topic from the last several letters. Did Hume ask specific questions to get this answer?
And this refers specifically to the God letter because Hume is questioning some parts of it.
Okay. So this is in response to the God conversation.
Yes.
And yet, weak as man may be over his involuntary nervous system, such as the blood circulation, the throbbing of the heart, and respiration, especially during sleep, Yet how far more powerful man appears as master and ruler over the blind molecular motion, the laws which govern his body, proof of this being shown by the phenomenal powers of the adept and even the common yogi, then that which you will call God shows over the immutable laws of nature. Let's read that one more time. And yet, weak as man may be over his involuntary nervous system, yet how far more powerful man appears as master and ruler over the blind molecular motion, the laws which govern his body, proof of this being shown by the phenomenal powers of the adept and even the common yogi, then that which you will call God shows over the immutable laws of nature.
So it makes it sound like God isn't that powerful. Even adepts and yogis can control their respiration, their heartbeat, digestive processes to a fairly high extent. But even what they call God, what you will call God, doesn't have any of those abilities to control nature. It operates as it's going to operate.
What Westerners call God does have power. God creates floods. God creates famine.
Well, they think it does.
Well, yeah.
But he's disputing that.
Okay. Okay, right. Yeah, because the Western view on God, he does puppet master everything. He answers your personal prayers. He answers you or doesn't answer you.
A micromanager.
Yeah. It sounds like he's... Okay. Yeah.
They're disputing that.
Okay. Contrary to the finite mind, the infinite mind, which we name that simply for argument's sake, for we call it the infinite force, exhibits only the functions of its cerebellum. Right. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
The primitive unconscious part, that makes, okay. The existence of its supposed cerebrum being admitted as above stated, but on the inferential hypothesis deduced from the Kabbalistic theory, correct in every other relation, of the macrocosm being the prototype of the microcosm. He's speaking in very challenging language for me to understand here. Let's try to break that down, I guess.
Yeah.
Contrary to the finite mind, the infinite mind, which we name that simply for argument's sake, for we call it the infinite force, okay, instead of the mind, that makes sense, exhibits only the functions of the cerebellum. So the infinite mind is operating based on almost like instinct, but because it's just the way it is, that it's not a God being that is like specifically saying, okay, I'm going to now create a planet over here. This is called Saturn. No, that's not what's happening. It's almost like the concept of the out-breath of Brahma, metaphorically, is the Big Bang, the expansion of the universe. Then the in-breath of Brahma is the pralaya, where it dissolves again. It's not like conscious. It's like a pulsation or a force. Okay, I get that. But let's see what the rest of it was kind of confusing here. On the inferential hypothesis deduced from the Kabbalistic theory, macrocosm being the prototype of the microcosm.
As above, so below.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it's just one more instance of the proof of that theory, that everything that happens above happens below. So if you understand this part, you have at least an inferential understanding of the macrocosm and vice versa. But what he's saying basically is that everything in nature retains memory. All of this has existed before in various systems and in various combinations. None of it is brand new. So whenever a new cosmos comes into being, it doesn't have to be created so much as it just has to be allowed to automatically do what it does.
And hopefully a better way than last time, because there is some instinctual memory.
And that is part of the natural process, is that when you repeat something, you automatically try to make improvements. It's just in our DNA. It's part of who we are. So no, none of this is new. None of it is a dramatic new invention. It's all old stuff being improved upon.
Many of you have gone to a foreign country. Can you remember the first time you went to a foreign country? Perhaps maybe you were a little bit more anxious traveling outside of the country. Maybe you didn't know as much, obviously, as you could have known. And then did you go to that country again? Have you ever been on a trip to the same place again? And was it easier? Was it a little bit of a better experience? Was there a little less suffering because you had some memory the first time? That's the below. And then we're talking about the above, like many stages above, obviously, but that's the concept.
So this is really a groundbreaking concept, what he's teaching here. In fact, it's so unusual, so difficult that in Joy Mill's book, she didn't address any of this. And it is hard to grasp what it was that he's trying to get across here.
Groundbreaking in the late 1800s for sure, and still somewhat groundbreaking now for anyone who hasn't opened themselves to any concepts like this. This is very different than what the Bibles teach. So far as the highest planetary spirits have ascertained, who, remember, have the same relations with the trans-cosmical world, penetrating behind the primitive veil of cosmic matter as we have to go behind the veil of this, our gross physical world, the infinite mind displays to them, as well as to us, no more than regular, unconscious throbbing of the eternal and universal pulse of nature throughout the myriads of worlds within as without the primitive veil of our solar system.
So he's saying they don't know any more than the Mahatmas do. As far as the thinking mind, the cognitive mind, all they know is this subconscious, non-thinking mind.
So we're clear. He's talking about the highest planetary spirit, meaning the entities that rule the planets.
Solar logoi and planetary logoi.
And are those not the same as Dhyan Chohans?
They are the highest of the Dhyan Chohans.
Okay, so they're not people, but
they are
evolved beings in a way.
Yeah, they're kind of a synthesis of who knows how many individual monads at whatever given point. And it's not just one single human that evolved all along. No. It's this conglomeration of monads and their combined experience.
It's the combined experience of trillions times trillions times trillions of incarnations of beings, rocks, plants, animals, humans, devas, probably in this solar system and others. They are highly evolved spirits that we're calling planetary spirits. And this concept has been used as God to some cultures and some traditions. Many cultures worship the sun as a god, the sun itself, and that is a god to some traditions. This is the type of awareness or consciousness or being that he's talking about. And he's saying that these beings, these massively evolved beings, don't have any actual data knowledge more so than the Mahatmas themselves do of how the universe works. Because it's the cerebellum, not the cerebrum.
Right. Mind blown.
Mind blown right now.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I think when I realize that, I'm like, wait a minute. So when I die, I'm not going to all of a sudden know everything. Even when I become enlightened in a few hundred more lifetimes from now, I'm not going to know everything. Because the frickin' sun god doesn't even know everything.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes sense. How could they know everything? There would be nothing left to learn.
But even about the creation of the solar system, it's a natural, he calls it a throbbing, just a natural pulse.
And remember,
we have to end right now. This is my gosh, this is actually amazing.
Yeah,
to think about.
Exactly. So these planetary spirits he's talking about not only have trillions upon trillions of life experiences, but trillions and trillions of universes without end. There is no history of any beginning or any end.
It's actually somewhat comforting, though. There's no end goal. There's no smart being out there that tabulates everything like this grand architect in the Matrix. There's no architect who sees all the details. It's not that at all. The consciousness isn't like that. The consciousness is just like, hey, I've experienced so much. I've got all this history and knowledge. Now I'm participating in creating, but I'm not like detail thinking about it. I'm just flowing with it in a way.
Yeah. So it's all natural. It just happens.
How many times have we said that we should live with nature? That's the ultimate example of it, really, of living with nature.
And in the end, there is no other choice. You either live with nature or you get ground up and you start again from scratch.
I wonder how much suffering is involved in Planetary Spirit. None, really.
None.
Because they live with nature.
They don't worry about whether you or I attain enlightenment now or billions of years from now. There is no time for them. That's why the people who do care about human beings are the Mahatmas, because they have been in our position relatively recently. They know more what we're struggling with than any Dhyan Chohan does.
The cerebrum is what allows us to choose things that cause suffering. The Mahatmas probably are not 100% finished with suffering, are they?
No.
They probably have a little bit, like when Morya broke his pipe.
Right. But like I've said, it's almost entirely involved with them trying to help Hume, the frustration that they obviously encounter.
This doesn't seem practical to many people, but this is practical. This gives us a clue, more clues on how to live and what we're doing here. This is practical, even though it seems super vague and crazy to think about, but this is practical information right now.
But it's only practical if you are tired of suffering.
Right.
If you like the suffering, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing just fine. But you will get to this point at some time when you look around and you say, really? Is this all there is?
My mind is blown right now.
Am I going to keep running in this hamster wheel forever and ever? And when I look around, I realize I haven't made even a quarter of an inch of progress.
Terry, I've been studying with you since 2007, approximately. This is mind-blowing right now.
I know.
Goodness.
I'm learning this myself for the first time. I've read this book 4 times at least, and I never picked up on this before.
Shall we continue? Let's continue. Okay, thus far, we know.
Yeah, remember he said we only teach what we actually know. We don't teach theories. We don't teach something that someone said and they're supposedly an authority figure who was a prophet who knows how many thousand years ago, and all of these thousands of years later, through all of these writings, we know that this is true. No, they know from personal experience what they teach. And anything else, they say, we have been told this by people who are higher than we are and who have more experience than we have, but this is from them.
To the very edge of the cosmic veil, we know the fact to be correct, owing to personal experience and from the information gathered as to what takes place beyond. We are indebted to the planetary spirits, to our blessed Lord Buddha.
Now, I don't know if that means that Buddha is now a planetary spirit, but that could very well be the case.
Wow.
But what he's saying is that there's an unbroken line from the very highest planetary spirits and Dhyan Chohans all the way down to the Mahatmas. And that at every step along the way, this information is transmitted as much as is possible down to the level of the Mahatmas and their chelas. And that this is the way it is.
And then through the chelas, hopefully through the Theosophical Society or other means, out to any human being who's interested in receiving it.
Right. And we are the weak point in this link because our antakarana is not fully formed and it's not perfectly accurate. So we try to be as accurate as possible, but we're still learning. There are lots of things, as you see in our presentations, where we have to go back and make corrections, and we will do that forever. Well, not forever, but forever in this incarnation.
Of course, this may be regarded as secondhand information. There are those who would prefer to regard even the planetary gods as erring, meaning making errors, disembodied philosophers rather than accepting the evidence of fact. Now, he's using the word gods, planetary gods. We have to take it with a grain of salt.
Yes.
We don't want to get confused there.
Right.
So be it. However, I will go on for the benefit of those who may still grasp my explanation of the problem and understand the nature of the solution.
Yeah, so he's saying, I don't expect you're going to be able to understand this. And remember, he's talking to Hume, but I'm going to still continue because somebody may derive some benefit from this.
It is the peculiar faculty of the involuntary power of the infinite mind, which no one would ever think of calling God, to be eternally evolving subjective matter into objective atoms. You will please remember that these two adjectives, subjective and objective, are used only in a relative sense. Cosmic matter to later be developed into form. Okay, this is such deep stuff.
This gets abstruse.
It's the peculiar faculty of the involuntary. So he's talking about the cosmic mind again, but the involuntary power, meaning the cerebellum, like the unconscious or involuntary portion of the cosmic mind, which no one would ever think of calling God because it's not a being masterminding everything, to be eternally evolving subjective matter into objective atoms.
So this cosmic potential matter into all the levels right down to including physical matter.
So he's saying it is the faculty of the involuntary pattern.
Right. This all happens automatically without somebody manipulating it all.
In other words, creation. This is what we can call creation. A manifestation of a universe, maybe a Big Bang, maybe something else. But yes, the creation is involuntary. It just happens. This is what we were saying. Okay.
No, it's coming clear.
Yes. And it is likewise that the same involuntary mechanical power, so he's calling mechanical, like, think of like your eyes closed and like you're just doing something that you don't really think about. Okay. Likewise, it is that same involuntary mechanical power that we see so intensely active in all the fixed laws of nature. That makes sense too, which governs and controls what is called the universe, the cosmos. So we got gravity, we got magnetism, we've got motion, we've got energy. Those laws of our universe that we observe are just there. That makes sense. No one thought about that and created it.
No cosmic coder created a video game with all of those elements.
Yeah. There are some modern philosophers who try to prove the existence of a creator from motion. We say that motion, the universal perpetual motion which never ceases, never slows or increases its speed, even during the interludes between the pralayas. Oh, that's why you said even in pralayam, there's motion or nights of Brahma. Okay, a day and a night of Brahma. I was referencing earlier to an out-breath and an in-breath, but that could be a minor cycle of the day and night of Brahma. But goes on like a mill set in motion, whether it has anything to grind or not. For the pralaya means the temporary loss of every form, but by no means the destruction of cosmic matter, which is eternal. Now remember, cosmic matter is what Terry just said. It's the potential for physical matter, like the blueprint and the inner planes, or one of the inner planes, for the physical matter that we know, because that's eternal. It can't be destroyed. That's interesting. Wow. But manifestation means it's coming into a physical, which can be destroyed, but it potentially never becomes.
It comes into different levels and eventually into physical.
Oh my goodness, this is deep stuff. We say that this perpetual motion is the only eternal and uncreated deity we are able to recognize. He's calling the motion itself a deity.
If you want to come up with a god, this is the only one that we could even remotely call a god.
This motion. And this might be what in the yoga philosophy refers to as Ishvara. That might be a similarity.
Remember, Ishvara only exists during the Manvantara.
Okay, so it's
not in the pralaya.
But it's hard to even imagine motion being a deity. That's challenging to
Well,
conceptualize.
he's saying that we would never
Right,
use that
right.
term. So that's the closest we can come to what you're calling a god.
To regard God as an intelligent spirit and accept at the same time his absolute immateriality is to conceive of a non-entity, a blank void. Yeah, that's weird. He's saying that it's kind of illogical to think of God, the Western religion's God, as an intelligent spirit, and he is not material. We heard this in the God letter 2 letters ago. It's like thinking of a blank void. Okay. To regard God as a being, an ego, and to place his intelligence under a bushel for some mysterious reason is complete nonsense. Now, what's a bushel?
He's making a reference to the Bible, where Jesus said, don't hide your light under a bushel, meaning a basket.
Okay.
If you've got something to share, don't hide it. So KH knows the Bible better than the Christians do. That's what he's referring to, is hiding something.
Who's placing God's intelligence under a bushel, though? He's saying it's complete nonsense to think of God as being an actual intelligent being. It's
Right.
nonsense.
And what he's saying is, if you know otherwise, then don't hide it, share it.
Okay. To endow him with intelligence in the face of blind, brutal evil is to make of him a fiend, a most rascally god.
Rascally.
But there's an answer to that. What's the answer in the Christian sense? Is there an answer to why God allows evil?
I don't know a logical explanation.
We don't know the plan. That's one answer. We can't know his reasons. He's mysterious in his reasons.
But we do know that nature allows evil,
Right.
because there's a reason for it. It gives us something to compare to.
And we can choose things because we're selfish. That's evil. That's the cause of evil.
And he's going
Is
to
us.
give some very good examples of just this very concept.
A being, no matter how gigantic, occupying space and having length, breadth, and thickness, is most certainly the Mosaic deity.
Yeah, it's an invented God.
No being, in quotes, and a mere principle lands you directly into the Buddhistic atheism or the Vedantic primitive acosmism.
Acosmism is the opposite of cosmism, meaning a created universe.
Okay.
So this is the complete opposite of that. It could be considered a type of pantheism, but could not be considered deism.
I didn't really consider the fact that Buddhism is atheistic.
Right. It doesn't believe in a God that created everything.
I did not know that. What do they regard the Buddha as?
An enlightened teacher.
Not God.
Not at all.
I did not know that concept.
They don't worship Buddha. They revere him as a great teacher who shared truth with an unenlightened world and gave all of us opportunities for becoming enlightened ourselves.
It's almost hard to call that a religion then.
Exactly.
Yeah. Just like
Well,
yoga is not a religion, but
It's a philosophy of life.
it's a philosophy, right?
And that's all we need. We do not need someone telling us what to do. Not if you're willing to take control of your own life. If you are not at that point yet, you probably do need someone telling you what to do. Just like children, they're not allowed to just do whatever they want. Well, some people's children are.
Yeah.
But that's not helpful. You need control. You need an authority figure to keep order. And most people are still very much children. So they do need that. And we don't want to discount that. It's important to them.
It is. What lies beyond and outside the worlds of form and being, in the worlds and spheres in their most spiritualized state, is useless for anyone to search for, since even planetary spirits have no knowledge or perception of it. That is crazy.
Yeah, even they don't know of anything beyond that.
If our greatest adepts and bodhisattvas, I'm not remembering properly, a bodhisattva is below the Buddha. Like
Right,
a
the
rank.
precursor to the Buddha.
Okay. And Buddha is considered a Dhyan Chohan?
No, it's a step towards Dhyan Chohan. Remember, in our cycles, becoming an adept is in the 5th round, becoming a Buddha is the 6th round, and becoming a Dhyan Chohan is the 7th round.
If our greatest adepts and bodhisattvas have never themselves penetrated beyond our solar system, they still know of the existence of other such solar systems with as mathematical a certainty as any Western astronomer knows of the existence of invisible stars which he can never approach or explore.
So he's saying our planetary spirits don't have any knowledge beyond our solar system, but that doesn't mean there aren't other planetary spirits that are in charge of galaxies and greater sections of the universe. So it goes on. Nobody knows just how far that goes.
But of that which lies within the worlds and systems, no one ever knew or will ever tell. Hence, it is something non-existent for the universe.
And remember, at every level, you are only entitled to secrets that you have merited. So some of these higher beings know far more than anyone else, and yet they may not be allowed to share that information.
Right. You are at liberty to place in this eternal vacuum the intellectual or voluntary powers of your deity, if you can conceive of such a thing.
Go for it.
You are at liberty to place in this eternal vacuum the intellectual or voluntary powers of your deity, if you can conceive of such a thing.
Yeah, so Hume is still being the debater. He's trying to show that what is being taught to them is just a theory. That's just somebody's ideas. And he's saying, I can come up with ideas myself. Like, for example, what about this? What about that? And it's his silly techniques of trying to gain mastery over the masters, of showing them that he's actually smarter than they are. I can come up with a system too.
Meanwhile, we say that it is motion that governs the laws of nature, and that it governs them like the mechanical impulse given to running water, which will propel them either in a direct line or along hundreds of side furrows they may happen to meet on their way, whether those furrows are natural grooves or channels prepared artificially by the hand of man.
So again, it's all just natural. It just flows. It's not like it requires some manager up here to supervise everything.
And we maintain that wherever there is life in however much spiritualized a form, there is no room for moral government, much less for a moral governor, a being which, at the same time, has no form nor occupies space.
So again, he's kind of making fun of Hume's Christian version of what this deity would be like.
Is he suggesting that there shouldn't be any teaching on morals?
No, he's saying that there's no governor that says this is what morality is.
Okay.
Karma is nonspecific. It works. Karma knows its business, and it's a principle. It's not a being.
And when Patanjali lists his yamas and niyamas, he's saying if you do these things, you can reduce some suffering in your life. But he doesn't say do them or else you're going to go to hell. And so if you need to see a list of morals, you can read the Yoga Sutras,
Right.
Sutra 254 or something like that.
Right. You can certainly make a list of things that would reduce your suffering in life.
Yes. But that's not the same thing as a moral governor.
That's not 10 commandments that came from Mount Sinai.
Verily, if light shineth in darkness, and darkness comprehended it not, it is because such is the natural law. But how much more suggestive to say that light can still less comprehend darkness, nor even recognize it, since it kills wherever it penetrates and annihilates it instantly.
So again, K.H. knows his Bible. Straight from the Bible, verily, if light shineth in darkness, and darkness comprehended it not, how's darkness going to understand what light is? And KH adds to that quote and says, even more unusual, how much more suggestive to say that light can't understand darkness any better because it kills darkness wherever it goes. So he's looking at both sides of the equation. Darkness doesn't understand light, light doesn't understand darkness. He's quite perceptive here. So, yeah, in order for anything to happen, as we've said so many times, you've got to have the opposites: good, evil, light, darkness, truth, untruth. You have to have polarity in order to make any kind of progress. Otherwise, it's static. We're only partway through this letter, and the next thing he says is, if our doctrines clash too much with your theories, then we can leave the subject and talk of something else. And so, based on that, we're going to put an end to this session because we have a lot to digest from it. And then we'll pick up at this point in our session number 54. But stay tuned. We're getting some really insightful information that I've never comprehended before. So maybe the darkness in my mind is disappearing. I hope so. We hope that you will join us again. Thank you for following along.
A few moments later.
We better put an outtake on our video.
This is Paul after this session. I forgot to turn that light on, but it was fine.
We were talking about lightness and darkness.
Right?